Hi, my name is Jay Sugarman, and I want to welcome you to Museum Open House. This ongoing series features and highlights many of the outstanding museums and other cultural institutions throughout the state. The main purpose of most programs is to inform viewers about current and upcoming exhibits, various programs, resources, and other opportunities that are available for the general public. Today we're fortunate to have as our guest Roz Kreizenbeck and Max Metz Jr., both from Historic Newton. Roz serves as the education coordinator, and Max's role is that of manager and educator. This is the first of a two-part series highlighting the wide range of programs offered by Historic Newton. Today, Roz and Max will be informing us about the engaging series of school and youth group programs. And on another occasion, we'll hear about the outstanding selection of adult group programs. Let's start by meeting our guest and then finding out about the opportunities for school and youth groups. Welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Really appreciate both of you taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Before we jump right into hearing about the wonderful series of programs for school and youth groups, I think it would be of interest just to hear a little bit about your backgrounds and how you came to your current positions. Roz?
Yeah, absolutely. So I came to Historic Newton from Harvard's Peabody Museum after going to the GW University for my master's in museum education, and have a background in history as well as museums, so it's a really wonderful place to work.
Terrific, terrific. And Max?
My background's a little bit more circuitous, and getting here to Newton, I started in my museum work at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute in Panama, but my background is in non-traditional education and outdoor education, and I've been with Historic Newton for just about 7 months.
Terrific, terrific. Well, there's a lot to cover with the school groups, but I think it would be helpful, especially for those people maybe not as familiar with Historic Newton as others, just to hear a little bit about its overall mission and different properties, what it has to offer in town, and briefly, and maybe pick that up at another time.
Yeah,
Roz?
absolutely. So Historic Newton as a whole consists of the Jackson Homestead and Museum on the left there, and the Durant Kenrick House on the right, as well as we manage programming at the city's 3 historic burying grounds. And our mission is really to share the stories of Newton history within the context of American history.
Very nice, very nice. And jumping to the education programs, which definitely high interest, for me, especially as a former teacher, had a number of nice associations over the years, and just see how it's growing and growing is really wonderful to see. Before we delve into a couple of the programs in a little more detail, I think it'd be nice to get the big picture for viewers of what you've put together and offer for a range of students, both in and out of Newton.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we're really excited to offer. We now have 7 distinct education programs. We offer 3 at the Jackson Homestead, 3 at the Durant Kenrick House, and 1 off-site. And all of our programs are really artifact-focused and inquiry-based, so really encouraging students to discover history for themselves and scaffolding them to be able to do that. So it's very active, very inquiry-based programming.
Could we hear just a little bit about each of the programs, maybe very briefly, just to get a flavor of the range?
Absolutely. So I can talk about the ones at the Jackson Homestead. So I'm based out of the Jackson Homestead, and of course, our most popular program there is Journey on the Underground Railroad, because the museum, when it was a home of the Jackson family, was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And that program is wonderful because we can talk about abolitionists such as the Jackson family, but then also what were those experiences like for enslaved people who were freeing themselves, which is a really wonderful program we do. We also offer our program Digging for Evidence, which is all about Native people and using archaeology to kind of get at talking about objects and what can we learn about Native people from objects that they left behind. And our final one for our younger learners is If You Lived at the Jackson Homestead, which is really encouraging them to think about how would my life be different if I had lived here 150 years ago, and having them examine different primary sources and different objects and think about things that are the same and things that are different.
Yeah, what a great resource to have locally to get that begin to get that appreciation of history, especially in this highly digitized age, it's quite an eye-opener to come in contact, especially with the approach that you take with the artifacts and hands-on approach.
Absolutely.
And Max, how about at your site?
So at the Durant Kenrick House and Grounds, we primarily focus on the colonial story. Two of our programs focus specifically on the daily lives of colonial people, fostering an understanding of the differences of the way in which people lived and giving our students an understanding and a kind of an experiential journey and understanding that experience. One of our other programs talks about the difficulties of having to make the decision of becoming an independent republic or remaining part of England. And so the students really have to problem solve and make their own decision and really discuss some of the opinions and facts that were floating around Newton at the time. And our last program focuses on the connections between, and the connections and differences between colonial settlers, European settlers, and the Native American populations that were already here in Newton.
Nice. You know, still, since Durant Kenrick House and Grounds, still rather new, especially compared to Jackson Homestead, could you share with people, even if they're not in a school group, to where it is so they can make their way over and appreciate what it has to offer?
Absolutely. Most folks know it as the greenhouse that's on 286 Waverly. So folks will drive by all the time, and many folks think of it as just a beautiful restored house, which it is, but it has a wonderful education space and it has amazing interactives in the museum portion of the house as well. So we'd welcome anybody to come by during our normal business hours.
Nice, nice. And then in addition to the visits to the museums that people can go for field trips, whether they're students in and or out of Newton, you also have outreach where you go to schools and put on programs for a number of reasons, whether they can't make their way there or not.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's hear about one in particular right now that you from Jackson do.
Yeah, so we absolutely love to collaborate with teachers and kind of think about ways we can bring the museum into their classroom if there's different obstacles for them to come to us. We are free for all Newton Public School students to attend programs at the museums, but even with that barrier removed, bus costs are still quite large, can be upwards of $300 for students. So a lot of times we'll work with teachers to bring our mapping change in your community program to their classrooms. This program is really aimed at 3rd and 5th graders and encouraging students to think about how communities change over time and designing their own community.
Nice, nice. And I mean, that hits on a topic that sometimes doesn't get covered for various reasons enough, just geography and people's high interest in not only anything hands-on, but map making.
Yes, maps are such a great entry point for people of all ages. I know we take this program to schools, and we have 2nd graders that can just sit still and pore over a map for 20 minutes. And then at the Durant Kenrick House, I've seen adults come in and sit and try to find their home or where they grew up in on a map for upwards of half an hour. So the maps are such a great entry point.
A nice hands-on version of Google Earth.
Yes, exactly. And we do use Google Earth a little bit to talk about kind of how our community has changed over time.
Well, we have a few images related to the program, so let's make our way through, and if you could please highlight what we're seeing.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of our educators, Tracy Linbow, actually in one of the classrooms leading this program. And so this program is really great because we can bring it into the classroom and work with the students where they're comfortable. So it's a little bit different than the programs in the museum where we might be walking around exhibits, but we try to keep it active and keep everybody engaged.
And coming to mind is, I think, another fabulous resource that you have for educators are pre- and post activities. So for this one, is there any of that involvement?
Yeah, we do offer for all of our programs on our website. We have packets for teachers that include pre-visit activities, post-visit activities, different vocabulary words that are helpful for students to know before coming or before participating in the program. For instance, it's always helpful for students to know what a compass rose is before talking about maps. And all of that information also includes different standards alignment. So I know a lot of teachers, when they want to bring students out of the classroom, they need to be able to show how it's going to help those students meet the different standards. So we really want to help teachers wherever we can to make that easier for them. So this is part of the program where we have students actually looking at maps at the beginning of the program and getting them to think about, how do I read a map? How do I navigate around a map from different time periods, and getting them to just practice that skill a little bit. And so what we do, this one is obviously from modern times, this is from 2016, and we have them trace on the map the location of the Jackson Homestead. And so by looking at this map, they can find it, also notice how densely populated Newton is at this time, and think about what are some other landmarks and streets that might help me find the Jackson Homestead again.
And when you're in the classroom for this program, is it a whole class sort of presentation interaction, or do they do small group work?
We do a combination of both, just to try to keep it active and keep everybody engaged. So we do some activities as a whole class, but then this map activity we break into small groups. And so each small group is looking at their own map, which is really fabulous.
Nice.
And this is, so eventually working their way backwards in time, the students come to this map from 1855 and are continuing to trace the location of the Jackson Homestead, which I marked with a star here, because it's no longer the Jackson Homestead, of course. It's the estate of William Jackson in 1855. And so this is such a great opportunity to get students to think about not only the fact that the museum used to be someone's home and how does that change, but then looking at this map, which roads aren't there? How are the houses differently spaced? How come people have such huge plots of land? And that really gets at how populations change over time, how communities change over time, which is really fabulous to see.
Terrific. Yeah, if we have time, it'd be wonderful to hear a little bit more about the Jacksons themselves, so we'll see how we're doing.
Absolutely.
This is wonderful, especially when you bring some artwork into it, engages a whole other set of learners sometimes.
Yeah, and that's something we really try to do in all our programs, is really give those opportunities for all different kinds of learners to access the same information. So after students have had a chance to look at the maps, we then think about, okay, so what do communities need? And how those basic things that community needs, residential places, places to buy things, places to make things like industrial buildings, how those categories don't change, but the ways in which they're interpreted over time do change. And then they build their own maps with different buildings of each of those categories on their maps.
So are they given any set of requirements, or how does that work?
Yeah, so of course, because we're a history museum, we try to keep everything as accurate as we can historically. So students start out with different statistics from 1855 based upon what section of Newton they're working on. And they've been kind of pared down a little bit, but so they're actual statistics though, and they have to add a certain number of places to live, things like that, to their map.
Oh, so that's really interesting. So you have data from the different parts of Newton, and then they go about creating the town that would maybe match up as correctly as possible with those type of resources or what would be needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, and it's really wonderful to see the students problem solve and think about how you might want to build your town. What might you want to put near where you live? Do you want to put an industrial building next to a school? So really thinking through those problems, and we've gotten wonderful feedback from teachers that the experience students have with maps prior to this program is pretty passive. They're looking at maps, they're maybe being told about maps, but here they get to actually engage and create their own, which is great.
Really nice, really nice.
So then after they've created their maps, we put them all together. So we don't tell them this in advance, which is always fun. But so they're actually each working on a different quadrant of Newton. And then we put their 4 maps together on the wall, which you can see. So you have this great oversized map of Newton that they've all created as a class. So while they're working in their own groups, they're actually all working together at the same time, which is really fun.
I know it's quite a leap forward, but how does that map and what they put on it compare to the different sections of Newton today?
It's actually really interesting to see. There is so much residential building, and the students can kind of pull that out right away, because we'll ask them to look at it and see what they think. and just seeing all the residences that are there, and how in the center of Newton is really, or in the center of communities, is where all services are located. And students actually make that leap pretty well and can kind of see like, oh, the center of town is where things are, which is pretty reflective of how Newton developed and how our different villages within Newton developed.
Nice. You know, I think since you could bring in maps to any historical topic, I think this must be such a wonderful springboard when they go back to the classroom, whether it's that grade or soon after, where they're both more comfortable with maps and can appreciate what maps have to offer rather than, as you said, be maybe as passive as they were before engaging in the program.
Yeah, exactly. And even outside of the classroom, driving around their own communities and thinking about what's near my house, what do I drive by every day, how might this change in the future is really fabulous.
Yeah, I guess that's, I'm sure you've thought of that as a potential activity, maybe something they can go back in the classroom as future Newton.
Exactly. What do I want my community to look like? Which is where we kind of try to leave the program to say, at the end, say, so think about when you're exploring your community, what would you change? How do you want to see your community develop?
That's wonderful. And I know, just like visiting either of the institutions, so reasonable as far as the cost to have yourself or one of the other educators visit the school. It's really such a tremendous resource.
Yeah, we really try to remove that barrier as well. So to have one of us come to your school is only $90
Nice.
as opposed to $300 plus for a bus to come to us. So we really try to remove as many barriers as possible to get all of our great resources out to teachers and students.
That's terrific. And as you said, online, there's wonderful teacher resources as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if they are fortunate to get the funds to visit one of the sites, the terrific programs are definitely available. I'm going to look at one of them. And Max, could you share this one that I know you're very familiar with at Durant Kenrick, Colonial Survival and Civility, please?
Absolutely. So this program really begins with students analyzing the actual museum itself. They're able to really explore the museum and dive into the ways in which people lived in that time period. The whole program is really designed for them to make comparisons between how we're living today and how folks lived in the colonial times. And so they're able to really look at what kinds of things were similar, what were different, and that's done in that first portion through the museum experience, the traditional museum experience.
You know, since, again, maybe some viewers haven't had the chance to visit, could you give us just a quick tour or highlight some of the wonderful, especially interactive features of Durant Kenrick?
Absolutely. So the story of the house is that it does interpret about 300 years of history, which encompasses 3 different families. So the first family, of course, being the Durant family, which is part of the Colonial Survival and Civility program, as they were in the colonial time period. And that is 4 different rooms of the house. So they're able to really go through that experience and see those artifacts. Many times they are interacting with the activities in the rooms, one being looking at how land use was during that time period, how much land a family needed, how much time they needed to be able to survive. What was that work like? And this is an interactive, really thinking about or using the cognitive aspects. Later we go outside, as you can see in this picture, and actually get to try some of that as well. But the house does continue to interpret those other families and those other stories as well.
Yeah, I have to emphasize, because you can't use it enough, the word interactive with Durant Kenrick. If you haven't been there, it's, again, well worth visiting just to appreciate how every room engages you. And it's not just going and looking, which has value in itself for sure, but really so much thoughtful work has been done in the construction, not to mention the outside color, of course,
Absolutely.
of the house and grounds. So moving on to this program, what are we seeing here?
So again, that's that first portion of the program where students are engaging with the artifacts in the actual museum and really trying to interpret what's going on. They then move to the outdoor portion. So this is that indoor portion, and the outdoor portion is them actually looking at what were those daily activities in the colonial times? What would it be like? What would we have to do every single day to make life happen, right? And so that could be getting water with the yoke and bucket, as you see here, and we have the yoke and bucket here with us. It could be in the spring planting, in the summer harvesting and tending the vegetables. It's picking up sticks, it's finding firewood. And they really enjoy this they are transported on this journey in thinking about a colonial lifestyle.
Well, it must be quite the competition to get to do this activity. I'm sure, does everybody have a chance, or how do you figure out who might get to do the buckets?
Absolutely, everyone has a chance to do all of the activities, just trying to be equitable in that. We rotate around our property, and everyone's really able to try all of those activities and experience that, the kinesthetic experience of what it would be like.
Nice, nice,
Yeah.
nice. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned kinesthetic, because, I mean, that's definitely overlooked in creating educational experiences, whether in school or out, but so important for all range of learners, and some maybe even more so than others, in addition to the arts, as we've mentioned before. So this one has to do with some of the harvest?
Absolutely. So the third portion of the program is a bartering. So they are thinking about the resources that they need to live, whether that be food. We kind of skip over clothing because that can be a little bit more difficult, but also firewood and those other resources. And they have to think about what it would be like to go through a bad winter and a good winter, trade with each other. They have different backgrounds as well. Some might be fishermen, as others they might raise sheep. And so what kinds of resources each of those tradespeople have as well is part of the whole experience.
Oh, that's terrific, because, yeah, another really valuable and rich opportunity to infuse education is role-playing. And to bring that in through this bartering activity is terrific.
Absolutely.
Fabulous, fabulous.
And it's a social experience as well. And we know that students learn well in social experiences, and all of our programs really encourage an interaction between the students themselves. It's not a top-down kind of educational process. It's really them coming up with their own answers, and we guide them to those wonderful discoveries that they're making on their own.
Now, does this program also lend itself to pre- and post-activities?
Absolutely.
And what might you do before and after?
So it really depends on what the teacher in the classroom is interested in. I don't know if, Roz, if you want to talk a little bit about what we have provided on the website for this program.
Yeah, so for this program specifically, it just depends kind of where they are in the curriculum. So for teachers, maybe if they're just starting out and talking about the colonial unit, we provide some background on who were these colonial families in Newton, what did this colonial survival and having to work together as a community, what did that look like and why? So that really could be a huge variety of different things for teachers to just start out. But then we also do lessons that they can bring back to the classroom to kind of wrap this up, and having students think a little bit more deeply about what they did and why they did it. So whether it be kind of responding to different writing prompts or class discussions, just to delve a little deeper and to think about, especially with this barter game and with the chores, and thinking about how did people work together and why. Thinking about that necessity of having to be a community in order to survive and how important that was.
Nice, nice.
Which is a really great way to bring what they did in the museum home.
And another opportunity, I guess, time permitting, in the classroom to make that comparison to what's going on in Newton today and how people interact and get along, and maybe perhaps trade things, maybe Craigslist or something.
Yes.
Well, it's that social experience as well, and that social experience extends to interacting with the museum in different ways, whether that be our archives or our other resources. And so all of our programs do use primary sources from our archives or primary sources in 3D artifacts from our museums. So that really infuses a reality to these programs that sometimes it's hard to grasp. What happened 300 years ago? What would that have been like? And they're able to make that jump with those primary sources and those artifacts that we bring.
And I believe that's another opportunity for just the general public to explore the archives and resources, if that's something they want to delve into.
Absolutely. The organization does support a lot of research in the archives, but that is all kind of scheduled through our archivist as well.
Nice, nice, nice. And This is a wonderful sort of wrap-up of this activity. Could you share, if people can't quite see what we're looking at?
Absolutely. This was just a recent program. A school from Dedham came in, and this was part of a packet they mailed to us, excuse me, and they drew pictures and reflected on a writing prompt that was given to them by their teachers, and they were using cursive. And we all learned cursive, but all kids today aren't learning that wonderful skill. And so they first participated in a program at the Jackson Homestead where they're actually reading cursive handwriting, and they saw the reality that people do use this. Then they were able to have a different kind of experience at the Durant Kenrick, and so they were just reflecting on that wonderful experience they had.
Nice, nice. You know, that leads me to just follow up briefly. What is the overall reaction to the number of programs, both in school or in Museum House, of students first?
Yeah, of students, it's been overwhelmingly positive. It's really fabulous to see students leave and just see the smiles on their faces, how excited they are. And then I'm not always there on the weekends to work, but I'll hear that those same students are bringing their parents back. And the parents are like, I can't believe they looked at the hearth and they knew what this object was, and they were telling me all about the stories of the people that lived there, which is just such a great way for us to see, similar to these letters, what the students are taking away from the experience, that they're really remembering carrying the oaken bucket, that they're remembering those stories and sharing them, which is so fabulous for us to see.
That's great testimony. And how about from teachers, educators? What the feedback that you get from them?
Yeah, we get pretty great feedback from them as well. We've been really trying to expand our programs and take that feedback we get from teachers and think about how we can improve and how we can be more effective. And we've been getting really good feedback about that, especially with the mapping program. That's kind of a newer one that we've been working on, just really tweaking and getting it to be as effective as possible. We're offering that program now through the Creative Arts and Science program at Newton Public Schools. Yeah, and we've had really great response from the parent-teacher organization groups that have looked at that program and observed it, which is fabulous to hear kind of their thoughts about ways to tweak it to make it a little better, but then also hear them saying students sat still and were engaged for an hour and a half and are so amazed at how well we can engage them in looking at things like maps, which maybe seem sort of static, but if we present them in a way to them that's really exciting and new, how engaging it can be.
Nice, nice, nice. You know, in addition to this overview and a little detail of the rich programming that you have, very briefly, any upcoming areas that you're thinking of starting to explore more or have begun?
Yeah, we're thinking about, we've gotten some feedback from teachers that they maybe are talking about Native people in their classroom and are using images of artifacts. So we're starting to try to think about ways to get our Native programs into classrooms as well.
Unfortunately, I have to wrap up now. Want to encourage people to make their way to the website, maybe first, but definitely to get over to both Jackson Homestead, Durant Kenrick for a visit in the near future, and look forward to making it there myself again. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
Also want to thank those of you watching for joining us, and hope you'll be able to tune in next time.